the UK. Well, my guests tonight are Charlotte Migeon. She's the spokesperson for the anti-nuclear group Sortir du Nucléaire. Here on my left is Bruno Combi. He's the president of the Association Environmentalists for Nuclear Energy. And Harry Bernas is a research director at CNRS in Paris. Now, Charlotte, you were just about to respond to Bruno Combi's points that he made about how Germany should be following France and not the other way around.
Yes, I think that's the opposite. Well, it might be. Yes, it is true that in Germany we pay electricity more expensive than in France. But it is also true that in Germany people consume less electricity than in France. And it is a balance. It is a balance. And what I would like to say also is that Germany committed also to very high greenhouse gases cuts goals. And it is not the case in France. And also what I would like to say is that Germany could produce about 47% of its electricity from renewables by 2020. Well, and then what I would like to say is that having a lot of nuclear power in France does not make us less dependent from oil. In the contrary, we consume much more oil per inhabitant than other countries, just like
here in France.
Yes, in France, more oil than people in Great Britain, in Italian, whereas they have the same development level as us. So we should not say that because we have nuclear power, then we are all clean and people should take us as example.
No.
A word on Germany. I think we should be very careful before we start being arrogant with the Germans. I think the way they've gone, if I can come back to my historical viewpoint, initial historical viewpoint, they're thinking in terms of where is the future? And when they decided 10 years ago, not a few months ago, not Fukushima.
So this wasn't a reaction to what happened in Japan?
No, it was the signature of something that had been decided 10 years before and discussed and began to be studied for 10 years.
But hang on, weren't they about to extend the life of nuclear plants and then they changed their mind in the summer?
Sure, that's politics. The socialist government had an agreement with the Greens in Germany 10 years ago, and they had agreed to phase out nuclear power. They started working on it. 6 months before Fukushima, Siemens told Areva, with whom they had an agreement to build nuclear plants, well, we're going to do something with other people, not with you. And 6 months later, or barely 6 months later, they said, we're getting out of nuclear power. We're all in renewables. The main industrialist in Europe is 100% in renewables. I think they're looking towards the future. And
so you're saying Germany has more of a long-term view than France
my worry
does.
is that it's time for French industry to start thinking about how we're going to do the industrial revolution on our own.
Let's take a look at how France and Germany compare to the rest of Europe in terms of nuclear power. I think we've got a visual for you we can bring up now. And there you can see those numbers there. They are the number of active nuclear reactors in Europe at the moment. You can see Russia with 32. France, a lot more than that, 58. The UK has 18, and it says it wants to build 10 more over the next 15 years. We've got Spain with just 8, and Sweden with 10. So that's, you can see kind of there where the French and the Germany, of course, with just 9. So you can see where each country compares, and France is way ahead of other countries, isn't it?
France is indeed way ahead of other countries, and that's the way we should go, and other countries should look at our example. But to answer Harry on the question of Germany, it's interesting to see that since the Fukushima accident and Germany stopped a small half of its nuclear reactors already, the exact same amount of electricity has been transferred to importation from coal plants in Eastern Europe. So it's not a big progress to stop those clean, modern, and safe nuclear power plants in Germany because they're very safe, and replace them by exactly the same amount of electricity coming from Eastern Europe with dirty coal. Now, coal is the fuel of the 19th century, not even the 20th.
And
the
coal,
19th.
am I
It
right in
says
saying
big
coal still provides the majority of world's energy at the moment? It's around
Yes,
40%.
and especially so in Germany, and more than ever since they stopped the nuclear reactors. So it's not a step forward; it's a huge step backward.
Okay.
Can I argue
Yeah.
with that? That's politics. That's politics on the part of the German government. When you say we're going to stop and you really stop, people realize, okay, they did stop. So I agree with you. It's going to take it's going to produce greenhouse gases and so forth. It's understandable. But in the long term, let's try to think long term.
But if they're still dependent on
In the
coal, how is that a long-term view?
The plan is to get to 40% renewables. I don't know if they'll make it. It's going to be very hard to make it.
That's a
by
politician's
2000.
promise. It just doesn't work.
It's a politician's promise. Then it's a matter of debate and how people are going to put pressure on the government to do it.
Well,
It's not easy. I'm not saying it's going to work.
strong will is good, but it's not always enough because there's
Well,
laws of physics
strong
are
will
still
has
here.
produced 58
I think
reactors
the point.
in France.
I think the point is, though, isn't
Well,
it?
yes, but it works with nuclear power. It might not work as well with renewables.
Charlotte,
It's
I think
much easier
I
to build
think-
a solar plant than to build a nuclear
Let's take it
reactor.
one at a time.
Not
Let's just
exactly.
take it back.
It might not be true, in fact.
Because we're talking about politics and energy, and nuclear power is probably the most contentious and the most emotive, isn't it, of all nuclear power. So I just want to get to the fact of whether or not, these decisions to scrap nuclear plants or keep nuclear going. How you say it's about a long-term political goal, but it is very political, isn't it? German voters were probably pleased with the decision that their government took because they were thinking about what happened in Japan. It is political, isn't it?
Yeah, it's political, but it's not short-term political, it's long-term politics. I think, and it's also politics in the noble term. It's hearing what citizens want, and it is not what was made in France. In France, the French nuclear power program was never voted.
But French citizens have always been very supportive of nuclear power, haven't they?
No. When you see opinion polls, you see that whenever there is always a broad majority of French people against nuclear power, or at least who have doubts about the safety of nuclear power. And whatever, there has never been a vote in the French parliament
when
about
France
nuclear power.
moved to nuclear power in the 1970s because of the oil shock and everything else and all those external pressures, it was a bipartisan movement, wasn't it? And it was something
Absolutely.
that was supported by the majority of French people, and French people are more in favour of nuclear power than most other
they
nations.
had to do with it,
You
but
dispute that?
there were huge struggles by that time. And what I would like to do is that there has never been any vote either from the population and from the parliament. Elected people, they were asked what they wanted about nuclear power only when it came to dealing about nuclear waste. So you have to vote about the consequences, but you cannot vote about the thing in itself. So it's a big
So
problem.
if you had a referendum tomorrow here in France, do you want nuclear power or do you want to get rid of it? You think most people would say, we want to get rid of it? If you had a vote tomorrow.
I think that, yes, we need a vote. We need law about nuclear power. And the majority of France is in a right way against nuclear power because it sees the risk, because it wants clean energy and really clean energy, and it wants an energy transition. And I think we really need a phase-out nuclear power law.
That is Charlotte's opinion. But in fact, when you look at the history of nuclear power in France, nuclear power here is a matter of national pride. Becquerel,
I'm not proud
the
about
scientist, well, you're not, but many people are. Becquerel, who discovered radiation, the radioactivity, more than a century ago now, 115 years ago, was a Frenchman.
But didn't the French buy in American technology in the 70s?
Pierre and Marie Curie were French.
But the French bought in American
and she
technology,
died from
didn't they?
leukemia.
Of course, the French reactors we have today are inspired from the American technology, but we improved it and made it better. Now the Indians and the Chinese are also buying the French technology and will probably also improve it and make it even safer than it already is. But in fact, we're very lucky to have nuclear power today because we have a solution to the energy crisis, which the world is running in faster than ever. And I'm afraid that with the very bad political decisions taken in some countries, such as Germany or Belgium, the energy crisis, not only for Germany and Belgium, but for the entire world, is going to be even worse than we might expect.
common are nuclear accidents? Because this is what makes it so contentious, isn't it? Because when things go wrong with nuclear power, they go very badly wrong, don't they?
Well, yes and no. When you look at the history of nuclear power over the last half century, because it's 50 years old now, there has been 3 major accidents. 3 Mile Island, no one died, no one was injured. So it's a bad accident that kills nobody. It's not that bad in a major industry. Then the Chernobyl accident, of course, was a tragedy, but that's the perfect example of what should not be done with nuclear power. I'm in favor of clean nuclear power, not Chernobyl-type reactors.
If I can just pick you up on that, though, because looking at statistics from the IAEA, that's the UN's nuclear watchdog, they don't record all of nuclear accidents in history, but with that and some news reports as well, I've found 33 serious incidents since 1952, the first one which was in Canada. 6 of them in the US, 5 in Japan, 3 in the UK, 3 in Russia.
Yeah, you mentioned the word incidents, which is not the same as accidents.
Right.
Now, the bad accidents...
Serious incidents and accidents.
Now, they're really bad ones, which are level 5, 6, 7, and more. There's very few of them.
So contamination to the environment, but not to...
well, in the case
of people losing their lives.
In the case of 3 Mile Island, there was hardly any contamination at all in the environment.
There were.
Well, very small.
There were
nothing.
some reports.
Almost nothing.
There were some reports of people talking about ill animals and talking about getting ill.
Well, that's the anti-nuclear reports. That's not really
That's
the truth.
reports
You
from
see,
physicians.
you see, radiation is everywhere in nature. Our whole planet is radioactive. And it is radioactive to rather high levels in some areas. For example, if you go to Fukushima today, just outside the fence of the nuclear power plant in Fukushima, the levels of radiation are about 10 microsieverts per hour.
So you would be quite happy
Now
to go to Fukushima with your
I
family
would go today
spend some time
with
there
my son and
It's-
spend a few days there. Maybe not in the reactor itself, of
No.
course.
Would you eat rice?
Yes, I would eat rice. Yes.
Did you hear the news this morning?
Because the Japanese have banned
Yes.
the
You see,
rice
there's
from that
many,
region.
because the regulations on radiation levels today are very low. But in fact, there are areas in nature where the radiation levels are much higher.
Bruno,
because
you know
the
very
regulations
well
apply
that-
only on the industry.
There is dust that has come out of the reactor. Pieces of the insides of the reactor have come out and are spread. And there are places around Fukushima, up to 30 or 40 kilometers away, on which are highly
Well,
radioactive.
just outside the
I'm not
fence.
saying that everything is radioactive.
Harry.
I'm saying that there were explosions, chemical
No,
explosions.
I would
not
say
nuclear.
everything is radioactive. Of course,
I'm
everything is
I'm
radioactive.
not saying anything is
but to
radioactive.
very low levels,
I'm
which
sa-
are not dangerous.
There were
No.
500 millisieverts. 500 millisieverts.
500
that's not low.
millisieverts, that's a very high dose.
It's a very
But
high
that's
dose.
the dose
There
you
are
had on March
pieces-
15th,
there are-
just near the buildings
No,
of the reactors.
no,
That's
there
not
are
the dose
pieces,
today.
No, there are pieces. This is measured on cesium-137. There are pieces around, on the ground,
Even plutonium.
right next to it. It's 10 microsieverts, I agree. Absolutely, you're
10
right.
microsieverts is not a huge
We
amount.
don't-
There's areas in nature
What?
where you have it and there's no
Okay,
evacuation of the
okay,
population.
okay.
But what do you
There
think?
was an explosion. There was danger. Can we come back to the debate?
Yes, please. Well, I think that the effect of, I think talking about how dangerous nuclear power is central to the argument,
Sure.
isn't it? This is one of the main things that puts people off nuclear energy. I think if it wasn't dangerous, people would be much more in favour of it, wouldn't they? But just to pick you up on that, talking about Chernobyl, people were very ill after that. People.
Oh yes, Chernobyl was
leukemia.
was a very bad accident, even with civilian contamination. So of course, Chernobyl is the exact example of what should not be done with nuclear power. It's a reactor without a containment. It was an unstable reactor. It was not
But I
designed
don't understand
properly.
the difference when you have a radiation leak, be it in Chernobyl or in Fukushima or somewhere else. People will get sick from that.
Well, it depends on how much radiation comes out of the reactor. And in the 3 cases you mentioned, it's hugely different. You have at least 3, if not 6 zeros difference from one case to the other. In the case of 3 Mile Island, almost nothing went out of the containment because the reactor had a containment.
Because of the way it was built.
In the case of Fukushima, there was a major natural disaster which damaged the containment.
Okay.
And it was an old containment which is not as thick and as safe as the
And
ones we have
that's
today.
interesting today.
And in the case of Chernobyl, there was no containment at all. So that's what you should
That's why
not be
people
doing.
got sick. Okay, so because today you've got a report by the IRS saying that France needs to work on its safety for its nuclear power plants. It doesn't need to close any of them down, it says, but it says it does need to invest in making them more safe and secure. So if you're against nuclear energy, do you think that money would be wasted and it shouldn't be spent on making these power plants more secure?
I think that some nuclear power plants should be closed definitely because they are unsafe and it will be much more expensive to make to try to improve their safety. Then we have to put this money rather in a I don't know in a energy saving plan and in renewable energy development plans. So I think some nuclear power plants should be closed already, and then we cannot phase nuclear power within just, we cannot phase it overnight. So for the remaining years, it is sure that we need the highest safety as possible, but we want this time span where nuclear power should remain to be as short as possible. It is true. And what we want also is that the safety for the workers should be as high as possible. And right now, the nuclear power workers themselves, they say that nuclear power is not safe anymore. And they say that they have serious concerns about their health and about accident risks. And we have to take this into account.
Another interesting example, in fact, is the case of Sweden. They decided to phase out nuclear power in the early 1980s. Now, that's 30 years ago. They promised they would phase it out in 25 years at that time. But what did they do? When you look at the situation today, they reversed the phase out, or they phased out the phase out somehow. And in fact, today, Sweden produces more nuclear electricity than it did at the moment it voted the phase out. So it's not that easy to phase out nuclear power, and it is a clean source of energy. So we should be careful at the words we're using, because we really need a solution to the energy crisis, and nuclear power is a good solution.
All right, we're going to have to end it there, I'm afraid. We've run out of time. Bruno Combi, Harry Bernas and Charlotte Mijon, many thanks indeed to you all for being with us tonight, and thanks to you for watching. That wraps up tonight's discussions. I'll be back at the same time tomorrow for The World This Week, where we look back at all the top stories of the past 7 days. Until then, good night.